tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, welcome. Yes, here we are. Can you believe it? It is Friday, February 11th, 2022, and we're still all here. How about that? Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out the Coop podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show right now by heading on over to our YouTube channel, if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And look, if you listen to our podcast, on Apple Podcasts or like our iTunes, make sure you head on over there and give us a 5-star review. That helps other people find the show. Our podcast number's been pretty cool lately. Kind of very thrilled. Anyways, today's show. Whoa, what can we not talk about? So what a week. And I was just realizing right before I got kind of caught up in finding some of the live updates of what's happening in these kind of like the Freedom Convoy or whatever the hell they're calling that thing up there in Canada, the trucker protest. And I was like, oh my God, I'm running late here. And I didn't just realize, looking at the show notes, I didn't even put in like the Trump toilet scandal stuff. So that you got that, right? Trump flushing down documents. Pretty crazy. Russia's also taken a few steps closer to provoking war in Ukraine. That can't make anybody feel very good. And the Canadian trucker protests have been intensifying. 3 international bridges have been blocked and supply lines are being further jammed up. I know GM has had to shut down some plants because they're not getting some of the parts that they normally get from Canada. It's been pretty crazy. The Biden administration is urging the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to use his federal powers to end the bridge blockade. And copycat protests are creeping up in other parts of the country and even across the world. A new reporting today in the New York Times suggests that weekend protests in the United States, supposed to be, I guess they're going to be going from California to Washington, D.C., these trucker protests, they may disrupt the Super Bowl this weekend. And that's according to the Department of Homeland Security. Pretty crazy. And as the COVID cases As the number of COVID cases start to slowly decrease, even Democratic governors are racing ahead of scientists to roll back the pandemic safety protocols. So much for listening to the scientists. Yeah, remember that? Remember that was like an article of faith? I guess not. When it comes to political expediency, you abandon the scientists in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, the new Omicron subvariant, which is now dominant in South Africa, this is the so-called stealth variant or whatever, and it is spreading rapidly. It spreads much more quickly even than the regular Omicron, but they're saying that it's not more deadly, but we could still see more, which is fun. And it looks like sticking our heads in the sand during a pandemic isn't an entirely new American practice. Nope. Writing in the Washington Post, Jess McHugh took a really interesting look at what happened ahead of the fourth wave of the Spanish flu back in 1918, 1919. Tony's, that was just fascinating and a bit of a downer of a read, I have to say. But we'll talk to you a little bit about that. Speaking of downers, Australia has just designated koalas as an endangered species. Environment Minister Suzanne Ley said in a statement, quote, the impact of prolonged drought followed by the Black Summer bushfires and the cumulative impacts of disease, urbanization, and habitat loss over the past 20 years have led to the new designations. A little closer to home, PA Supreme Court put a hold on the period for candidates to gather signature petitions to qualify for the May 17th primary. Really, Pennsylvania right now, what's happening in Pennsylvania voting laws, and it's confusing, and it's happening fast with all this redistricting. According to the AP, say, for example, the 3-week petition gathering period was set to kick off on Tuesday and last for 3 weeks. This is kind of the normal period, right? Instead, the PA Supreme Court noted it was hearing oral arguments on February 18th in a case that will determine the lines of congressional districts. So basically what's happening here is because these district maps have not been set, the state Supreme Court is going to have to decide on what is going to be a fair district map. Remember last week we talked about this, the PA Commonwealth Court was saying like, oh no, we just got to pick one of these Republican ones, basically, right? But that's a kind of GOP dominated court, and now it's going to the state Supreme Court, which leans more on kind of the Democratic side of things. We're not entirely sure what's going to happen. I know that some folks have believed that this is the state Supreme Court is simply just going to redraw the maps like they had to do last time. We shall see. I'm not so sure. But it's basically jamming up the entire process at this point, right? So, Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Court spokeswoman Stacy Witalick said that the order pertains to all races and keeps the primary date intact. The order did not say when the court will produce the new petition gathering period. So, there's supposed to be a 3-week petition gathering period. The primary is set for May 17th, and now they're saying that, well, no, we're going to try to keep that date intact. The closer we get, you see what I'm saying, right? The things more gets compressed. And of course, there's all sorts of other legal challenges and stuff that are going on from regarding voting procedures and stuff, and we'll get into that a little bit this coming week. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to have the show on Monday. And Victor Martinez, a Lehigh Valley Latino radio station owner, says that he may join Republicans to contest newly drawn congressional maps. According to the Pennsylvania Capital Star, quote, Martinez has argued that the maps as currently drawn will dilute the voting power of Pennsylvania's Latino residents, even though they are the fastest growing demographic group in Pennsylvania. Like, this stuff gets really complex once you see where these lines are drawn and so on. So even though it looks like in the Lehigh Valley area that you're going to have an increase of Democratic representation in the area, there's some dilution, according to the article, of these kind of Latino-dominated districts, right? They're not kind of made into minority Latino districts, but they're, in terms of like, you know, the power of the Latino vote in those areas, the claims are being made that it's being diluted, and this is kind of unfair. This is going to be really fascinating to see how this plays out. And Central Bucks School District's field trip to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. was canceled this week because some school board members were upset with D.C.'s strict vaccination requirements. Yep. Diana Lagerman, who, you know, we've had on the show, is former school board candidate in Central Bucks. She tweeted out her outrage at the cancellations, and it went viral with more than 90,000 people viewing her tweet. We're going to talk a little about that story. It's a great story, and the process of what happened here, and the fact that when people were expressing their concern about this, some members basically said, well, they could just go to Dorney Park, like a little amusement park up in Allentown, instead, because it's the same thing, you know, DC, the Holocaust Museum, and Dorney Park with water rides. Somehow those don't seem like equivalents. Oh God, and no more Lehigh Valley news. The Bethlehem-based alt-right podcaster Joseph Paul Berger is facing federal charges for allegedly stockpiling a cache of more than a dozen unregistered machine guns. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Lehigh County prosecutors say that Berger once encouraged his listeners to, quote, assassinate lawmakers, lobbyists, and left-wing billionaires with explosives. Berger was also found to be 3D printing a collection of untraceable so-called ghost guns in his parents' basement. And his father, apparently in on the deal, was also arrested. In today's last call, NASA now says that SpaceX's Starlink, you know, that little kind of collection of small satellites to give us internet anywhere on the planet, that kind of thing, well, it may actually interfere with the Hubble Space Telescope's ability to see things, and even NASA's ability to detect incoming asteroids. Go look up. Go look up. Oh man, and I just finished season one of I'm gonna have to talk about two things here. Season one of Foundation, and I'm glad I kind of finished it. It's actually now I'm at the point in the series where I'm kind of very, very intrigued, and some things kind of click together in my head, which I'm very kind of excited about, and I like the way this is going. I'll talk a little bit more about the fun of it, and then also for those folks, in the D&D world, that I've been kind of a little bit obsessed with D&D as of late. And so I started Critical Role, which is kind of, the streaming D&D show that really kind of like took off, right? And kind of like led to a whole series of other kind of shows kind of coming out and stuff like that. Really kind of paved the way, opened up for this kind of popularization of these online streaming games of voice actors and things like this, role-playing games. And they have a newly launched series. It's an animated series based upon the first season of it. It's called Vox Machina, The Legend of Vox Machina, something like this. And it's like, I have to admit, I was kind of excited to see it. And then I'm just left with some troubling things afterward. So we'll come back to it. We'll come back to the last call. I am looking forward to starting Ozark, hopefully this weekend too as well. And we'll see what else comes up here. I know I'm going to be checking what's happening in Canada all throughout the show. Anyways, onwards. For more PA-based progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch. I keep on forgetting to mention Twitch. He's broadcasting every night, right? This thing is now picked up. It's being broadcast on Free Speech TV every night. They've got a live call-in number, so you kind of tune into the show. You can call in live. I was listening to the show again this morning, and like there are people calling in from Minneapolis, from across the country. It was great. So head on over to the ricksmithshow.com and check out for the latest across all his platforms and show Rick some love and give him support. Right? Being the show that was born right here in Pennsylvania. Gotta love it. And it's official. Season 2 of the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast is flooding the streams. You can find it on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And attention gamers, the Game Inn, that's with 2 N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, and kids get discounts when they do well on the report card. How about that? Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's at The Game Inn on Twitter. And if you got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, just kind of shoot him an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongAdayMan. That's with 2 N's. That's at SongAdayMan on Twitter. And this coming Monday, we are back with our guests on Out the Coop Live. This coming Monday, February 14th. Yes, I know, Valentine's Day. Can you believe it? We welcome Pennsylvania Capitol Star House reporter Stephen Caruso to the show. He joins me to help make sense of the new PA maps, the emerging election chaos from GOP attempts to change the voting processes before the May 17th PA primaries. We're going to be live at a special time. It's going to be at 1 p.m., right? There's still even a slight possibility. I think it's a long shot, but we might even have 2 shows on Monday. But I'll get back to it. But we're going to be broadcasting live with Stephen Caruso from Pennsylvania Capitol Star at 1 p.m. on Monday. And look, I want to give a special shout out to one of our Twitter warriors, Starry-Eyed JGC. She tweeted out this week that they lost their dog Juno this week, and I just want to let you know that we're thinking about you and sending love your way this week. I know how devastating that loss can be, so my heart goes out to you. Thank you for all your work, and I hope you're doing okay. And look, if we want a progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. That's right. Simply go to patreon.com/rcpress and you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. We're here for the fight, right? We need this, but we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement the media. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, everybody, welcome to the show. I am here solo again today. We're kind of making this transition from, we were at a point where it was just me and Sean for the longest time, or Sean and I, excuse me, for the longest time. And Sean's run into those work conflicts. So, I mean, anytime we can get him on, if he wants to join the show, we're going to try to get him back on and stuff like this. But in the meantime, I'm still kind of thinking about kind of, doing that, taking an opportunity to kind of assess how to kind of move forward and what are the things that that we can do here. I can share with you one of the things that we're certainly going to be doing is we're going to have a much stronger, say, Bucks County focus, especially in the PA section of our Friday show. And that's kind of twofold. I mean, I've been thinking about this a couple times. We had Amy Connect on last week. I thought that was freaking awesome. And I want to have her back on the Friday show kind of more often. I also want to start reaching out to some additional, say guest co-hosts for the Friday show who could come on also from Bucks talking about it. And the reason for it is, I mean, look, I'll totally admit, I mean, there's a kind of like a self-interest factor here in part, right? Because I'm living here in Bucks County, but that alone doesn't do it, right? It's the fact that we've got one of the most important congressional races that's happening here, the PA first, right? The race against Brian Fitzpatrick. This and in the county at a time when you have, as we talked about on the show last week, you've got folks like Andy Meehan's Right for Bucks, kind of organizing kind of, the kind of the right wing troops, right, to kind of take over the Pennsylvania or the Bucks County Republican Party and move it further towards the Trump agenda, and the rise of kind of the return, we should even say, of more white supremacist militias in the area. We've seen the school board craziness that has taken off in Bucks County, especially Upper Bucks, but down Lower Bucks too as well. So this county is a contested county and a one that is, simmering with political conflict right now, and what happens here is gonna matter, right? So that's kind of my thinking here. And also the idea is that, look, there's a lot of amazing organizers who have been working on the school boards, who have been trying to find ways to contribute and bring people together. And I think, look, I think Raging Chicken, we should be doing our part by helping bring together at least a progressive media community that can kind of work in support of what the organizing that is happening on the ground, whether it's in school district, whether it's for kind of municipal elections, whether it is there. And I think that we're going to have much more of that focus on the kind of the local organizing and local power as we build out our base. And I think this is a critical moment. So we're doing that. I have some other things kind of in the works that I've got to follow up on. That something that I was planning to do last fall, but just look, frankly, I ran out of steam. So might try to reboot some of this stuff, just as another way that we can at Raging Chicken help keep an eye on what is happening in the school boards and kind of local races, especially as we move forward into the midterm elections. So more on that in the days to come. But so here I am. It's Friday, and it's just me. Well, it's not just me. It's just me, and it's you, right? I mean, that's the part. That's the only reason I keep on coming back and doing it, even when it's just me. Because you get to see what people are thinking and so on. If you got your thoughts during the show, please just kind of drop them in the chat. We have folks in here. Good morning, Amy. It's just a good morning. I had my chat covered up by a window there. My apologies. Mr. Here. But so just kind of a couple of items from the news that are just here. We're seeing, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in Russia, but that's getting a lot of attention right now. We're seeing some renewed attention from the national media on wanting to kind of turn to, one of those tried and true international conflict reporting stories, because they know how to do that, right? They can get back in their vein or back in their lane and just kind of like, click on the autopilot and get ready to do war reporting. I mean, it's a complicated situation. Russia keeps on, ramping up. So they're making all of the public claims that they're not planning on invading Ukraine. But and you've got these folks within NATO and the United States kind of wanting to say this looks like it's going to be an invasion, so there's this kind of increase of tension. Russia is doing joint exercises with Belarus and I forget the other. I'm sorry, Belarus and like right on the border of Ukraine, kind of, and people are reading that as, oh, look, if they attack, they're going to attack from multiple directions. So this is going to be more. And now you've got Ukrainian troops that are doing exercises. So it's one of those things where something could easily go wrong and lead to a conflict, even if people don't, quote unquote, intend to do things. So we're obviously got to be watching that. The thing that I've been really like focused a lot on is what's happening in Canada, right? The it's funny. I started saying this. Let me just see this just for a quick second. I just thought I saw a new update come by. No, that's another one. Okay. Sorry. Before I was talking about it, I did want to kind of say something that was outdated. So you have this like freedom convoy, right? That is happening up in Canada. And that's what they're calling it. They're calling it a freedom convoy. But what it is the, it is Canada's version of the kind of alt-right and the extremist, kind of the far right, basically showing their willingness to go to extremes in order to kind of like not wear a mask, right? So they've made a determination that, wearing a mask to protect, forget, they don't want to protect themselves, that's fine. But just to kind of do your part as a community to kind of protect other people, that's too much for them, right? That's too disruptive to their lives, right? Their snowflake selves are going to melt too fast. So they've got to make sure that they're going to, kind of, they can't, their skin is so delicate that wearing the mask is just it's going to completely disrupt them. It's too much, right? So they're going to take their trucks, and it's not just truckers, but it's also, that's who led the charge. Take their trucks to Ottawa and shut everything down and completely shut down everybody else's thing. So they're protesting the lockdown with a lockdown, which is kind of interesting. Good morning, Nick. Yes, snow. It is snowing big time up there in Canada. All the snowflakes coming down. Now, I should also say and make 100% clear, because the media is not always good in doing this, is that when we say a trucker protest, let's be clear here. 90% of Canadian truckers are vaccinated, right? The Teamsters have even come out and basically saying, we don't support this, right? This does not represent our views, right? Canadians have a much higher rate of unionization among truckers than the United States, because in the United States we decided, it'd be a great idea to break that, to break unionization on trucker by deregulating the entire industry and kind of privatizing and allowing for independent contractor works and all that kind of stuff, right? So anyways, so the unions come out and said, look, we're not supporting this, right? So you're talking about a small small representative number of Canadian truckers are really at the core of this. And we've seen money start to flood in, right, from kind of really kind of deep-pocketed kind of right-wing like billionaires and stuff from not just Canada, but across the U.S. and across the country. We see Fox News is treating this like, it's the kind of like the beginning of the apocalypse, right? Or like, and they see that, of course, in a good way, see the beginning of this kind of massive uprising. And it also came out that, the leader, like one of the leaders of this quote unquote freedom convoy, right, is a freaking racist. He's got like a little show. He does like social media stuff he does. And he's talking about like the Jewish conspiracy. And he's talking about, maybe we should just kind of like reread Hitler because we was misunderstood. Like crap like this is kind of coming out of this guy's mouth. Right. So it's become very, very clear, right, that what is happening in Canada is very much like the Tea Party was in the United States. Right, is that you had some people, you had a group of, you have a broad base of a population that is frustrated with the way things are, right? So I would think it would be fair to say that before the Tea Party came out in 2010, a lot of people were frustrated with the fact that, the United States had pursued about 30 years, 40 years of policies that have privatized privatized kind of public services, have allowed for corporations to kind of shut things down and move all the production overseas, right? That got behind, like brutal policing, all this kind of stuff that you can say. People were frustrated with the way things were, right? They were able to, their parents and grandparents, maybe even, were telling them stories, some of them at least, right? Especially white folks were telling them stories about the good old days. One member of a family could actually go out and have a good union job and have benefits and support an entire family on a particular mode of life, right? Of course, we know that's always racialized, right? Because that was certainly not the case if you were African American, if you were Chinese American, if you were like Mexican American, right? But in terms of the mythos of what was going on, and actually, the kind of the distribution of income across the country was kind of centered in the middle class, in part because you had strong unions, right? So yeah, so we've got that. So these folks are, they were generally concerned, right? I think they had their experience. They were finding they weren't able to make ends meet and things like this. And so you have that kind of broad-based concern about something. And then you have one particular group that says, we're going to push back on this, right? And initially, for a very flash-of-the-pan moment, right, it represents, it gets a little steam behind it because people are like, yeah, I'm upset too as well. And I remember this distinctly when the Tea Party first started having meetings in Kutztown. I remember some of my students kind of getting interested in it because they saw this kind of like neoliberal globalization as problematic. So they wanted to go and they wanted to join up with this, right? It took them about 2 meetings to realize that, like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, right? And then the money started flooding in from all these right-wing groups, right? All the kind of dark money started flooding into these Tea Party stuff and basically became this kind of, astroturfed organization that utilized people's anger at below, exacerbated racial tension, turned it into this anti-government, like anti-social program, like pro-free market kind of like nonsense, right? And use them as tools, right? Very much in the same way that we see what's happening now. What's happening in Canada, right, is the same deal, right? It's that we have exported, in the United States, we have exported a model of right-wing organizing to other countries, right? And to give it the veneer of kind of like working class, everyday people mobilization. This represents kind of workers, a pro-worker thing, when they're actually arguing for everything against what workers have been fighting for the long time, such as like safety on the job. Yeah, the majority of these truckers who are going across kind of, are protesting having to get a vaccine to be able to kind of take their goods across international borders, right? Because, as Nick says, because it's, they'll melt, the poor little snowflakes. They have to get that vaccine, right? Their protest is kind of like, they're not the majority of union truckers who are actually fighting for safe workplace regulations, right? Want to make sure that, look, yeah, I don't want to have to be forced to choose between getting COVID and my job. No, I got a union contract. My union contract's to make sure that, no, there's going to be safety protocols. Right? There's going to be safety protocols. So I'm not going to be forced as an individual, right, to put myself in an unsafe situation. Right? Just the way we want to make sure these trucks are inspected to make sure that, and when they're broken, they get fixed. That a driver is not forced into a situation in which they're going to have to, choose between their job and, risking driving an unsafe truck. Same way here. Right? This is just kind of workplace safety kind of stuff. Right? And beyond the workplace, it's also a community safety thing, right? Because if you have people that are going across borders, right, especially if you're a Canadian trucker going into the United States, where we've lost our minds over here when it comes to COVID, and then you want to make sure that, look, you're going to do your best, right? You're not going to be perfect on it, but you're going to do your best to make sure that you got folks that are going to be protected and they're not going to be kind of unnecessarily, dying or spreading the virus to other folks in Canada, right? Just kind of basic common sense stuff. What should have been, whatever, should have been what we've done here, but we shall see. So that's what we got. So, and what's happened now is they've started blocking these. It's what started as this kind of lockdown. It's like 2-week lockdown in Ottawa, where they've just crowded Ottawa's the capital of Canada. They've crowded the center of Ottawa and just park their rigs there, shut everything down, and it's become increasingly tense. But now this is expanded to actually shutting down international bridges between the United States and Canada. One of the critical ones, which was between, I don't know if it's called the Windsor Bridge, but it's the one that basically goes to Windsor, Canada, to Detroit. And that is I mean, look, those two regions, Detroit and Windsor, are kind of like one economic unit, right? I mean, there's travel back and forth there all the time. People, work in Canada, live in the United States, and vice versa. People will, parts are going back and forth. Production happens in Canada, production happens in the US, then it goes, switches over. But a lot of automakers have had to stop production because they get some of their parts from Canada. And these truckers have shut everything down. The Freedom Convoy has shut everything down, and they can't get parts, so they can't produce the cars, right? So it's having an impact on our supply lines already. So we already have these kind of the problems with our supply lines that's kind of influencing the rates of inflation, and now we're going to have another bottleneck on the supply lines because of these folks. Right. So when you start putting in that picture, you realize, okay, this is going to have a big impact. Yes, it's kind of like, all the rage, right-wing nonsense, Fox News and, One America News Network, Alex Jones conspiracy nonsense is kind of motivating a lot of fueling the flames behind all this. But on the other hand, it's also going to have an impact that's going to contribute to the very thing that you also have other sections of the right, the kind of more quote unquote, like, non-QAnon Republicans, right, who are basically saying inflation is the worst thing in the world. Well, that's pretty convenient that this is going to contribute to that problem too, right? Yeah, great. And won't that be something if we do get, as I suggested at the top of the show, if that the Super Bowl is indeed disrupted by the Freedom Convoy that is supposed to go from California to Washington, D.C. So this weekend is going to be a tipping point even here in the United States to see what happens if we're going to see these kind of right-wing trucker protests start happening in the United States. So we shall see. So I'm just following. I mean, I'm looking at, there's New York Times has got an up-to-date live updates from here. Let me see if there's anything else that's come through. I swear, because I was yesterday here. Here it is. What did I say? Ontario Premier declares a state of emergency as authorities brace for more protests. Ontario officials are turning to the courts to help remove protesters and thwart the spread of the demonstrations, which have partly shut down a major trade route between the United States and Canada. I'll just read part of this. This just broke. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, declared a state of emergency for the entire province on Friday as the police in Ottawa braced for thousands of protesters to descend for the third consecutive weekend of a crisis that has disrupted international supply chains. Quote, with a protest, you make your point and you go back home. I know that's what the vast majority did, unquote, Mr. Ford said at a news conference. Quote, my message to those still in Ottawa, those still in our border crossing, to those who brought their children, please take them home, and it's time to do so peacefully. Otherwise, quote, there will be consequences and they will be severe, he said, adding, quote, your right to make a political statement does not outweigh the right of thousands of workers to make a living. And it goes on. Now, I should read this here, too. This is also here. Hundreds of miles away along the border with the United States, Mayor Drew Dilkins of Windsor, Ontario, sought a court order to let him remove protesters from the Ambassador Bridge, which carries roughly a third of U.S.-Canada trade. The hearing was set for noon on Friday. So this kind of goes on. This is like just broke in the New York Times. So I got to say, there's a couple things that at work here is that you got these protests that are taking place that you have this calls now to remove them. And I'm pretty uncomfortable with start talking about needing to kind of like send in troops to kind of remove protesters. That's a little problematic, right? Especially because we don't, especially in this country, we don't seem to be able to make a distinction between the kinds of protest. Because in this country, if we start making a precedent for stuff like this, the next time that we have a civil rights protest, the next election where there's kind of voting rights protests, guess what's going to happen? They're going to use the same logic because they don't make any distinctions to do this. So this is going to be interesting. This is going to be an interesting development. So I'm sorry to spend so much time on this, but it's been really it's been really front and center in how I've been looking at some things, because it's really important. And like you said, it started in Ottawa, right? Funding started to come in from U.S. kind of right-wing sources and billionaires from all over the place, so these right-wing folks, and now it's starting to spread to other things using that kind of copycat, right? They're kind of exporting a model. And I got to say, I just finished this book called Bring the War Home, right? Catherine Bellew, I think is how you pronounce her name. Her book, Bring the War Home, and it's on the kind of rise of the white power movement from about, late, it's kind of the 60s through the 90s. And one of the things that this book is so good about doing is it shows you how there's this model of decentralized leaders. They call it leadership, or a leaderless kind of resistance, right? Which is this cell-based organizing, which you see in kind of guerrilla organizations and so on. And that really became the hallmark of white power organizing. The extension of this, and she makes kind of alludes to this or points in this direction at the end of the book, where she's really pointing to the fact that, look, this organizing model has done a few things. Number one, it has allowed the organizing efforts to evade media scrutiny, because we don't know how to look at things systemically in this country. So our reporters, for the most part, this is, again, I don't want to cast too far of a blanket, but generally are looking at things in terms of individual events, individuals, and kind of what's happening. The kind of deep investigative reporting and the kind of the narrative, the narrative of history, right? The narrative of the system, the narrative that allows us to see systems and not just individuals, that we're pretty weak on in this country, right? When it comes to the dominant forms of reporting. And so as a result, we take someone like Timothy McVeigh and we just see this as, the lone gunman. So, the lone bomber in that case, the Oklahoma City bomber. But we don't see the network and what kind of made that happen. And she does a great job of uncovering all these networks that the FBI, for example, just completely ignored, right? And the media completely ignored. Everyone was kind of quick, just wanted to kind of make sure that we just saw this was this one individual. The point that she alludes to towards the end of the book is kind of what we're seeing here, right? That culture of organizing, this leaderless, resistance, right? That you have these cell-based stuff that happens, that you don't have one central leader that tells everybody else to do. You have an ideology, right? A set of binding practices, right? Sets of training that takes place, and then people start taking individual action. So it doesn't take a ton of people in order to get something started. But once something's started, it's kind of like, it kind of reverberates through the network. They're like, look, they're doing this thing. I recognize this as the kind of resistance that is being called for in all my little militia meetings. So, hey, let's do that too, right? And now you see this stuff starting to pop up all over the place, right? And they've already got the ideological base, the practical base, and the organizational base kind of drilled into them from these kind of, half a century of kind of white power movement stuff. Right. And yes, I know people will say not everybody there is part of the white power movement. Okay, granted, not everybody is. Okay, what does that do to the argument? Nothing. Like, the fact is what motivates the organizing here is the kind of the history of white supremacy and white supremacist organizing, kind of in the United States and kind of beyond, that the right wing has embraced, right? And that's just the way it is, right? And so this is why, when Amy and I were talking last week about, what we look like for progressive organizing, really need to be thinking about organizing on the local level, right? Building out our structures and infrastructure at a local level and carrying it out is so important, right? Because, look, there is no white knight that's going to save us, right? And the organizing has to happen, has to be deep organizing, right? That we start kind of working kind of together and start thinking about what is it that we want, right? And how do we achieve that? How do we kind of accomplish that goal? And what are we willing to risk for it? This is what, the right wing right now is in this place where they're willing to risk it all, right? These people, these truckers out there are kind of like, they're, okay, you're blocking an international bridge. Can you imagine if a bunch of leftists went out and blocked the international bridges for several days? What would have happened? Just play that out in your mind and you already have the conclusion. So we shall see. We shall see what happens for the Super Bowl. So, and as we know, now you've got all the quote unquote blue state governors are now kind of rushing to stop the COVID restrictions, even though those restrictions are minimal at best in most of these places. Just kind of like everybody, like from New Jersey and New York and a bunch of other Democratic say, oh yeah, we're going to shut it down. So suddenly all these calls to follow the scientists, right? Believe the scientists, right? Listen to the scientists. They're just like, nope, sorry, we're gone. We're out of here. We're not going to do this. And, I mean, being in Bucks County, anybody else who's listening is from Bucks County, as well as I do that, we've been living with the lack of restrictions here. Like, I mean, our kids are being forced to go to school with no COVID protocols. We just saw that, I think it was Central Bucks basically said, hey, we're no longer going to alert people to positive cases. Yeah, we'll still report them to the county, right? Whatever. All the reporting comes out. I think Chris Ullery had an article on this about how Bucks County schools seem to be underreporting cases already, right? And, here we go. We've decided somehow, and I use we advisedly here, we decided that, we're done, right? There is a really important article, I think, interesting article in the Washington Post that really kind of brought this all home for me this week. And it's written by Jess McHugh. And she says, I want to read just a couple of paragraphs for you because I think this kind of tells you where she's at. She said, in New York City in 1920, nearly 2 years into a deadly influenza pandemic that would claim nearly 50 million lives worldwide, the new year began on a bright note. Quote, the best health report for the city in 53 years, unquote, boasted a headline in the New York Times on January 4th, 1920, after New York had survived 3 devastating waves of the flu virus. The nation as a whole, which would ultimately lose 675,000 people to the disease, believed that the end might finally be in sight. Within weeks, however, these optimistic headlines began to change. Before the end of the month, New York City would experience a surge in influenza cases. Chicago and other urban centers reported the same. Residents should prepare themselves for an influenza return, New York City Health Commissioner Royal Copeland warned. He predicted that the virus variant responsible for the surge would be milder than that those that would fallen ill from the previous year would be immune. He was wrong, at least in part. While many places worldwide did not see a fourth wave of the great influenza pandemic, several metropolises, including New York City, Chicago, and Detroit, had another deadly season in store. The 1918 flu lasted beyond 1918, despite what we would like to think. 2 years after it began, just as officials such as Copeland were declaring victory and cities were easing restrictions, a fourth wave hit parts of the country, bringing punishing caseloads that pushed some hospitals to the brink of collapse and left many more Americans dead. The virus did not seem so menacing when it began. The first wave in the spring of 1918 was relatively mild, but it returned with a vengeance in the fall, probably having mutated. That second wave burned through patients around the world, and streetcars were converted into hearses and so on. During the second wave alone, more Americans were killed by the flu than died in the First World War, the Second World, Korean War, and Vietnam combined, right? And it continues. And she walks through this, and she says, look, in the third year of the pandemic, after the third wave, the Spanish flu pandemic, 1918 through 1921, I guess, people got to the same point, right? People got to the point where they were just like, okay, we're done with this. Like, I can't stand this anymore, right? I want to get on with my life. And you had some positive notes coming out from health officials that were saying, hey, looks like cases are declining, right? So let's get out there. And they threw away the masks, they threw away the precautions, they kind of went out, and then boom, you got another wave of people getting, lots of people dying. And so the Spanish flu, 675,000 people dead. We're already past 900,000 people dead, right? And we're still in the winter, as we know, and people are still dying right now. There are lots of people that are still unvaccinated and refuse to, as we've just been talking about. And we're just going to lift all restrictions. So here we go. Here we go. Now, I like to think that, okay, yeah, things are going to be sunny and it's not going to happen this time. But, I'm always reminded, people love to say, you got to learn history, right? Those who refuse to learn history, like, are doomed to repeat it, right? We say these slogans in schools and everything like this. But when it comes down to it, when it comes to actually enacting that in the world, you realize, like, how many people have said that it's just been a slogan, right? Just something that sounded good at the time that allowed them to feel self-righteous over somebody else. Because when it came down to it, nope. Nope. So that's pretty crazy. We shall see. And this is, happening too as well. There's this, the Omicron subvariant is now dominant in South Africa. Again, they're saying it's not more deadly or something, but it is more contagious. They're saying it's mild, but it's mild in relative to what? Got to remember that, the Delta variant was considered the most deadly thus far, but it wasn't quite as contagious, right? So now we're measuring everything against that Delta variant in terms of deadliness, and we're forgetting entirely about the original one, right? When you start comparing the original, the wild virus or whatever, the original kind of coronavirus outbreak to Omicron, you find out actually they're kind of comparable, right? Delta was the outlier, right? But now we're measuring everything against Delta, saying, oh, look, things are better, but more people have died in this year than did in the original year, right? Before the vaccines even, right? Because you have more deadly and more contagious variants. So more people get it, more people die. And somehow we've decided that that's who we are as a nation. That's who we are as a people. And again, I'm using we advisedly here because I know, like you, who are probably listening to this show, and me, we've been doing our best to try to kind of make sure that we're like not being part of the problem, that we're being part of a solution. But whatever. God. What else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, and then the one best I was like so sad. It's like koalas have now been put on the endangered species list, right? The environmental minister in Australia basically saying, yeah, look, we had all this drought. There were all these fires that ran through Australia. Why do we have all those fires? Say it with me. Climate change, right? So we have more fires, more brutal weather impacts, longer droughts. Then you've got disease that has gone through. You have urbanization. You kind of the land has been taking back. Development of the habit or taking over the habitats and destroying of habitats, and now the koalas are on the endangered species list, right? So at least the positive thing here is they're not on the going to be extinct tomorrow list, which is good. So this is actually going to enable Australian agencies basically to protect areas and protect some of the habitats for the koalas, which is a good thing. But man, it's like we just don't learn, do we? No. Crazy. Oh yeah. Before I go to break, Amy writes in and say, speaking about veneers, say a website called Woke PA is a misleading front for a pro-white supremacist site. Class bait and switch. Yes, exactly. People may have seen this come up. It's a place called Woke PA. It's basically a snitch site, right? It's looking for, we're trying to get people to kind of like, basically tell on teachers and tell on kind of like communists, right? Whatever. It's like a Neil McCarthy kind of snitch line. So they're out there. And also, want to give a special shout out to Andy Meehan, which we know is a big fan of the show. And he's nicknamed us, the communist or the Bucks County Pravda. So how about that? We got Andy Meehan sitting there kicking in the nicknames. You got to love that, right? So apparently he really loved our show on the Right for Bucks and right wing organizing in here. So he's become a fan of the show. Insert sarcastic look here. So here. Anyways, we're going to take a quick break. And after the break, we're going to come back, talk a little bit what's happening in Pennsylvania, and prep you a little bit for our show on Monday with Stephen Caruso from the Pennsylvania, excuse me, from the Pennsylvania Capital Times. I'm sorry, I was choking a little bit there. And we'll talk a little bit about that and some other stuff happening here in Bucks County. But we're going to take a quick break. I want to remind you can help support this show. If you're on YouTube right now, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Share it with your friends. And if you are listening to this on iTunes or Apple Podcast, make sure you give us that 5-star review. That really helps people find the show. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken, here for our Friday Politics Roundup. You know, I just realized just now, I have no idea why I didn't see this. I guess this is where my head's been at. But I actually have, if you're watching the show right now, you know that you're looking at, wait a minute, this is the Friday show, which it says out to Coop Live and open phones and stuff. I just, you know, I'm on the wrong OBS overlay of my show, but whatever, we're here now, so that's where we're gonna stay. Anyways, some news in the PA this week. This year's election is going to get wild. Let me just put it that way. It's going to get wild, not in a good way, and not necessarily just because of the candidates, but because of what is happening with the redistricting, what is happening with attempts by the Pennsylvania Republicans to change voting laws. There's already this, the Republicans voted to overturn Act 77, which basically allowed for mail-in balloting. Governor Wolf is going to, veto it. It's going to be, and there's going to be contestations. There's going to be court challenges with a whole bunch of stuff. So this is the primary, like I said, is May 17th, and we're compressing time. Right. And that is part of the game plan for the Pennsylvania Republicans right now. They're going to try to compress time as much as possible to make things as chaotic as possible, because we know that when you make it difficult for people or you raise doubts in people's minds, that they disengage. Right. We've talked about this in the show for years now. Right. That when you cannot win the argument on its merits, what you do is you attempt to kind of raise doubt among people, because doubt breeds disengagement. Right, so that's kind of part of what's going on. Or chaos brings, this is too crazy, I'm not going to get involved. Right, I'm going to stay home. Or I don't know, am I able to vote? Or wait, did I miss a deadline? Or wait, is it here? I don't know. Probably, you know what? I don't know. So I probably don't. I want to be embarrassed by showing up under the polls and find out that I'm not on the list. So I'm just going to stay home. Right, so part of our work is going to be, part of the organizing work on the ground is going to be that kind of stuff, registering voters and so on. I know that there's a phone banking tomorrow here in Bucks County in the Penridge district, kind of looking to kind of make sure people are getting registered. I know that's going to be happening throughout the county and throughout the state. But these kind of court cases, these kinds of like indecisions and reportings about kind of problems with the voting, ideologically they cause problems. So, because the PA Supreme Court basically, like I said, put that hold on kind of petition gathering, which is just going to delay the process. You got to say there was a great quote in I want to say it was in the AP article on this, where they interviewed also Summer Lee, and Summer Lee's like, well, look, we've already got our organization built, right? Yes, this is we're anxious to get moving. But, you got to know what your district looks like. And so if you're running in a particular district, it matters. Like now look, I'm really bad at reading these congressional maps, and which is one of the reasons why we're having Stephen Caruso on from the Pennsylvania Capital Times on Monday. help us sort some of this stuff out, because my district, right now it's the 143rd, I believe, and for the state house, right, is going to change, and it's going to change in such a way that if I read the map correctly, the district used to be from just south of kind of where I'm at, then northward, right? And now it's going to be just my town and south of me, right? And so Percy used to be part of the Quakertown and part of the voting district. And it looked like, if I read the maps correctly, it looks like now Percy and Quakertown are going to be in different districts, right? So little things like that. And that's just the state house. What Summer Lee's talking about, of course, is the congressional elections. And because her area is gonna change, as is most other people's areas, except Brian Fitzpatrick, conveniently. So what's going to happen to that district? So they have to know ahead of time before they can gather signatures, which is why Supreme Court put a stay on it. Basically, you got to hold off on gathering signatures, because it could just cause further mess. And I think, look, it's a smart move on the part of the Supreme Court to do this, because you can imagine a situation in which, you play out the scenario. So say you start gathering signatures, right? You start gathering signatures because you have an idea about where your district is going to be. Now, let's say there's district lines change, right? And maybe let's say that, let's just pick a small number. 25 of the signatures that you gathered were actually kind of based upon the new lines, are in a different district, right? So you got to get rid of those things. You got to find them out. You got to get rid of them. Now, if you're kind of one of these, anti-voting Republicans that have been looking to kind of suppress the vote for so long, basically what you're going to do then is you're going to challenge all the signatures, right? You're going to kind of make legal cases and challenge all the signatures, saying that you gathered them in the wrong districts and that you're kind of padding your numbers because you're using stuff from your former district. That's how they would do it, right? And they say, because now there's going to be duplicate signatures and all this other kinds of stuff. And we just, again, raise the question, raise the doubt, raise the cost for that. But by putting a hold on it, right, they're going to settle the case, they're going to settle the lines, and then go forward. So even though it's causing some stress and it's frustrating and cause some kind of like outreach problems. That's weird. Outreach problems with actually trying to get people organized. I think it's gonna be positive in the end, as long as it gets done quickly. So there's that going on. So we're going to talk to Caruso about that on Monday. It's also interesting what's happening in the Lehigh Valley. This has been kind of ongoing local story for a while about, the maps are being redrawn because basically you had Republicans who were in safe districts in Lehigh Valley and were not representing, one of the largest growing populations areas in the Commonwealth, and really strong concentrations of Latino populations, African American populations, all sorts of stuff like this. And so you have these districts that were drawn to kind of protect the white guys, right, in that district. So the new districts are going to be drawn, and I shouldn't say just white guys, white Republicans. So districts are redrawn, right? And again, Caruso will give us the actual lowdown on this on Monday, in such a way that it's actually going to be more representative in terms of party. However, the way that some of those districts were drawn before, they were guaranteed kind of say Latino representation in kind of one district, right? Because they were overweight. No, it's not overweight. They were, you could call it like a packed district, right? So you had like high percentage of voters in there were kind of Latinos who guarantee that they would get this job. Now, apparently, some of that has been diluted. So instead of it being, say instead of being 60% Latino, it might be, say, 52%. I'm just totally making up those numbers. I want to be clear. But there's that kind of question, and there's claims by this guy, Victor Martinez. He's the Latino radio station owner in Lehigh Valley. He says he might actually join with Republicans in order to file a lawsuit against maps that would dilute any of the Latino districts. So this is going to be part of the push and pull that we're going to see moving forward. How do you balance kind of ethnic and racial representation with party representation in terms of population representation? That's going to be interesting. So we'll see how that plays itself out. I hope to get somebody on from the Lehigh Valley to talk more about that too as well. That's one of these things. I'd love to have a panel of some folks from Lehigh Valley to let us know what was going on up there, because it's very easy to see some of the discussion in very kind of like black and white terms, like it's either Democrat, Republican, because that's how it tends to get framed in the media. Yet when you're talking about kind of urban areas or kind of growing areas, really diverse areas, it can get more complicated in terms of what you're trying to do in terms of representation, right? So how do you kind of balance the stuff? And so we shall see what's happening up there. And we'll see, like, to what degree this is a legitimate concern, to what degree this is more of a Republican concern, to what degree so and so on. Okay, so let's talk a little about what's happening in Bucks again here. Though you might have seen this blow up on social media, blow up on Twitter this week. So there was supposed to be a field trip, right? There was supposed to be a field trip to Washington, D.C. The Tamanend, I think I got that right, Tamanend Middle School, 9th graders were originally planning to go to Washington, D.C., and as part of that, they were going to go to the Holocaust Museum, right? But that's not happening now. So the school board just voted down that. They just voted to cancel it. Okay. Why did they vote to cancel it? Well, part of what I'll just read this, right? So Diana Lagerman, right, who we've had on this show, right? She was a former school board member, our school board candidate in Central Bucks. She's just freaking awesome in terms of I'll just leave it at that. She's awesome. She tweeted out, said like, okay, quote, say, our school board just canceled the field trip to DC where students were supposed to visit the Holocaust Museum because a school board member's kid isn't vaccinated. An important educational trip canceled because she made a choice but isn't willing to accept the consequences of that choice, right? That was the key, right? Then she goes on, students were also supposed to visit the Smithsonian Museum and various memorials and monuments, all gone and canceled, right? So this, why I read this to you is because it blew up, right? Over, according to the Bucks County Courier-Times, over 90,000 people have viewed this post. It has been retweeted, kind of, let's see what we're at right now. It's retweeted 900 times. It's been liked 3,507 times. Like, that's just as of right this second, right? And it blew up, and now it's kind of actually made its way into the USA Today. It kind of got picked up about the cancellation of this trip, because this also happens against the backdrop, right, of these kind of anti-Semitic comments being made at school board meetings, and the school board refuses to kind of condemn them, allows them just to kind of happen without any condemnation of them or saying that this is wrong, we should be talking about this. Happens in context where they're going after quote unquote critical race theory because they don't want any kind of like any white kids to feel shame, right? And now you have Lisa, I'm going to butcher her name, Skitchios, I don't know. She was one of the school board members. She raised objections in saying that because DC has strong vaccination rules and COVID requirements, COVID vaccination rules, that some of the kids might not be able to go to some of them. What happens if they have to use the bathroom and they're not vaccinated? It's discrimination, I tell you. How can we do this, right? How can we do this? We're going to be looking at the monument of MLK and our kids aren't going to be able to pee, right? I mean, like that, right? I mean, this is kind of what's going on. And really what was motivating it, right, is because what's more important to them is that they hold on to their anti-vax stuff. And look, I just had a conversation with somebody at Kutztown University, like just yesterday, I think. I said, look, you want to be, where's the kind of the take responsibility for your actions crew, right? These are supposed to be the kind of like take responsibility for your actions up. Look, there's consequences for your actions, right? If I'm going to respect your ability, your kind of decision to say that you are not going to get vaccinated, right? Okay. But when you do that, then you need to take responsibility for that. What does that mean? That means because you know that you are more likely to contract it, right, and have a severe case of that, right, then you need to take some extra precautions to make sure you don't infect other people, number one, right? But these people are also anti-mask, remember? Not just anti-vax, anti-mask, open up, forget all the protocols. They want their cake and they eat it too. They want their virus and they want to eat it too. So there you go. He's like, okay, you want whatever your little freaking right-wing heart desires, right? And nobody's standing in your way, right? You're a freaking 3-year-old in an adult body, and you're teaching freaking kids and other people that it's okay to just kind of like, wah, I want what I want. I don't want to go to bed. You gotta freaking sleep. You know, I mean, like, whatever. So in this case, the vaccination stuff, okay, yes, guess what? The world, and we've said this before multiple times in the show, right? The world is bigger than these little small towns in Bucks County. And the world is, you know, has a range of different ways of dealing with stuff. And there's, guess what? There's different kinds of people elsewhere too. And in some places, like, they're not committed to freaking, like, paleo versions of culture, right? No, they want to live in a freaking future that's like dominated by kind of like care and kind of like looking after each other and equity and things like this, where we're better, right? That our goal isn't to go backwards, it's to go forwards, right? Anyways, so okay, good. You don't want your kid to get vaccinated? Okay, that's fine. And so now they have a choice to make. Either they don't go on the field trip, number one, right? Number two, they go on the field trip, but they know that they're not going to be able to see a bunch of stuff because they're not going to be admitted into buildings without proof of vaccination. Even though I have to say, some of the places that they chose to go to were known for not requiring vaccination, like proof of vaccination status to go to. So that's just a little sidebar. But so just because of that, so they weren't going to change it. And one of them had the freaking audacity to come out and say, like, well, they will just go to Dorney Park. We'll just go to the splash zone up in the Dorney Park and ride the roller coaster. Same thing, right? I mean, listen to her cry. I mean, it's 6 in the morning till 8 at night. I mean, there's kids who will have to use the restrooms. There's kids who may want to get something to eat. I have a 9th grader at Taman, and I have a problem with this because my kid won't be able to pee because he's not vaccinated. Well, I don't know what to tell you. And of course, the right-wing hit jobs are kind of out there already going after Diana Lagerman already because of this, right? She's like, look, I'm a private citizen at this point. I can criticize whoever I want. It's my right to criticize the thing. I'm not representing the school board, right? I am kind of criticizing what my school board is doing, right? In a district that I live and work, right? So whatever. So this is a great story. I've reached out to Diana too as well. Hopefully we're going to be able to kind of get her back on the show soon to talk about some of this stuff. What else is happening over there? Because it's just freaking crazy. It really is. Crazy. So we shall see. So I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted on that. I know we're gonna have to. She and I are gonna have to touch base now. That to see if we can work something out in terms of a time and things like this. So we shall see. We shall see when that's gonna happen. It might be an early pack day on Monday. So we shall see. I'm looking forward to it. Okay. Anyways, getting off here. So the other story. This is the other story that came across my feed, and I was just like, whoa, here you go. So apparently there's this Bethlehem-based alt-right podcaster, right? And let me just pull this one up here. Where are we? Here we go. Because I don't want to kind of miss some of this stuff. I have limited things in my show notes, but I want to. Okay. So let me just kind of, I need you to hear this, right? Because this is kind of stuff that Cyril Michaleko has been pointing to and reporting on for a long time. We've got folks like Jordan Hopkins, who's been reporting on the kind of the right wing based out of Philadelphia, and this was reporting here. He's also focused on some stuff in Bucks County. We've got some great folks up in the Lehigh Valley who've been basically unmasking some of these kind of extremists and militia-based folks up there. So I mean, lots of good stuff that's going on. And here's an example of why this is so important. So this is the Philadelphia Inquirer. So, an alt-right podcaster from Lehigh County, who prosecutors say once encouraged his listeners to assassinate lawmakers, lobbyists, and quote left-wing billionaires unquote with explosives, is facing federal charges for allegedly amassing a cache of more than a dozen unregistered machine guns. Prosecutors say that Joseph Paul Berger, 32, illegally modified many of the firearms found locked in the basement of his parents' Bethlehem home, turning them into fully automatic weapons capable of firing hundreds of rounds of ammunition at a time. At a court hearing on Thursday, they described him as an anti-government, anti-law enforcement, and, quote, an extreme danger to the community, unquote. Now, his lawyer obviously says, no, he's just making jokes, right? He never incited violence. It's just a joke. It was a prank, he called it, right? Now, Berger is a Navy veteran who lives with his parents and works as a certified armorer and machinist. He has not been accused of any crimes yet related to threats that made on his show. Instead, he and his father, Joseph Raymond Berger, were arrested earlier this week on charges stemming only from the weapons cache federal agents seized after raiding their houses in January 2021. Right? So this happened last year when that was seized, but this is happening in court. So now here, give you a sense of who these folks are, right? So the case comes with twin efforts by the Justice Department to crack down on the proliferation of illegal guns across the United States, also stepping up enforcement against domestic extremists in the wake of the January 6th assault on the Capitol. Groups with ties to white supremacy, like the National Justice Party, have rallied around the younger Berger, highlighting his case in an online post in which they accuse the Justice Department of, quote, blatant disregard for basic civil liberties and due process, unquote. The younger Berger, this is the podcaster, hosted his podcast Alt-Right Armory, that was the title of it, under the screen name Glock Doctor 1488. Right, so Glock Doctor, obviously he works on guns. He does stuff to doctors' guns, right? And the 1488 is basically, it's a white supremacist symbol. You have the 14, it's the 14 words. I'm not going to cite them on here, but it's basically a, defend the white race at all costs kind of stuff. It's a commitment thing. And 88, 8 is the 8th letter in the alphabet. H, Heil Hitler. So you see tattoos and right-wing white folks, white supremacists who use that. So that's his screen name, Glock Doctor 1488. So that nod to the white supremacist slogan about securing the white children for the future and the Heil Hitler glory. So in Berger's pilot episode of that podcast, he mused that, quote, a white man with a rifle can be very dangerous to the system indeed if he has the right motivation, unquote. And he has since praised on his program Eric Frein, who was sentenced to death in 2017 for the ambush slaying of a Pennsylvania State Police Corporal Brian K. Dixon, right? So he's encouraged that talks of assassinations. I'll say one more thing about this. So when they kind of busted his stuff, they found that they discovered a cache of 12 modified machine guns and 13 silencers during that raid, along with a bunch of 3D printer and some plastic firearm magazines for handguns. Now, these 3D printing things, they used a way to print guns without serial numbers, right? So you're basically printing these guns are called ghost guns because they're untraceable for folks who do this. It's become increasingly popular on the alt-right and the right wing. So this is kind of important to highlight again because that's like a ticking time bomb, right? You got a guy with the ideology, just what I was talking about before in the first segment. You got the ideology already in place. You got the self-organizing that's taking place in these small things. You've got an existing kind of media outlet they're using as a way to kind of gather those forces, right? And so all it takes is a trigger event, right? Where those machine guns don't just become something that are sitting in the basement of his parents' home, will become something that are being taken up and utilized as an assault. So, good thing to keep our eyes on, right? And we shall see. We shall follow that case too. All right. So that's kind of all I got here in Pennsylvania stuff. I'm really looking forward, like I said, to talking with Stephen Caruso on Monday to help sort out what's happening, where we are with the maps, give us a little summary of kind of like how we got here, where we're at now, and what we can expect going forward. And I think having that is going to be important, especially as, here locally, we're all kind of gearing up to start mobilizing, campaigning, and everything like this, to try to understand where we're at. Because I think it's also going to be important for all of us, anybody who's actually working on the ground, doing organizing, helping with campaigns, to kind of be up to date on stuff, so we know what we're going to be communicating to other voters, right? So that we're going to have answers to people's questions, because people will have questions about this stuff, and the more we know, the more we're going to be prepared to do some kick-ass organizing going forward. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We're going to take another quick break, and we're going to come back. We're just going to do a quick last call, talk a little space stuff, maybe a little TV stuff, and so on. We'll come right back after this. So this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We'll see you right after the break.
Where are my people? Where are my people? Where are my people? Where are my people?
Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. It's Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken, here for Last Call. We talk space news. We used to talk beer news. We don't do that really that much anymore. TV, film, whatever is going on. A little bit in space news. This is kind of always something I would like to follow up on when I can. So SpaceX, you might remember, they've got this Starlink system, right? Which in some ways, right, and just a purely, if you take it out of every context, right, it's really kind of an interesting and potentially game-changing kind of technology, right? So they're launching all these like small satellites that are going to circle the globe and potentially provide cheap satellite-based internet connections for anybody on the planet, right? So basically what you eliminate is you eliminate the need for wires and cables and all that kind of stuff, right? And it can provide direct link within there. Now, of course, we can talk about what that might do to the kind of monopoly of the internet and all this stuff. Like I said, I'll just totally, completely devoid of context. It's kind of an interesting idea. But the minute you put it in context, right, there's like problem after problem after problem after problem, right? And so we talked about this last week too as well, how they're planning on crashing the International Space Station into the Pacific Ocean in the early 2030s, and it's gonna be I'm gonna cry that day. I think I swear to God, I'm that much of a nut for that stuff. But so everything's going to be turned over to the privatization of space, right? Because there've been no plans to put something in the place of that. Rather, they're going to turn it over to the kind of the space industry as a way to okay, Ross. I'm sorry, I'll come back to that in a second, Ross. So what they look at. People in the space industry to turn over to these private companies, which can be headed by these billionaires, to be able to make and determine what we have up in space right now, right? The only other alternative, of course, is the newly being developed, like the Chinese space station, right? They just are building out, and they have plans to continue to build out their space station. Now, because of the laws of the United States is not allowed to work with China on any kind of space-based stuff. So China's like, okay, we're just going to do it on our own. Right. But, once you basically excluded like a country, right, another kind of like major power with kind of space aspirations, what you excluded from, and then now they kind of outpace you and they're out ahead. Guess what's going to happen? They're not going to allow you in. Right. I mean, it's like, duh. And they've already got plans. They've got a schedule for building out the space station and beginning to settle stuff on the moon. Right, to put the first moon base out there and all this stuff. And I said, look, Kim Stanley Robinson, my all-time favorite sci-fi writer, he wrote a book called Red Mars, right, a few years ago. And, he consistently does this, right, because he's this is why I like his work so much, is because I really love science fiction where you're taking existing dynamics, right, that exist, right, and then you're projecting them in the future. You're going to say, okay, where does this go, right, and what happens from here? What is if we take this thread, how does it play out? Right, the Mars trilogy, which totally captivated me. Right, it was basically saying that those books came out at a time when we're starting to see the kind of the globalization, corporate globalization happening. Right, and so it's like, what happens if you extend that corporate globalization to the way that Mars gets settled, right, in the kind of distant future? And then what happens to these other kind of alternative, say, resistance groups, right? And what are the opportunities for us reassembling, right? What happens to the role of science and all that? We project that out, and it just does it in an absolutely fascinating way. But in his recent books, he starts to bring he started to bring the lens of the future closer and closer to the present. And Cory Doctorow has remarked on this in his on his podcast, Cory Doctorow podcast, about how, you know, that process of moving closer has come. And so we got to Red Mars. I mean, Red Mars doesn't take place in the distant futures. It's kind of in the near future, right? And because Kim Stanley Robinson is kind of in, you know, he researches all the stuff, he reads about all this stuff, he knows that, you know, about China's plans for going and doing this. So China figures really largely in Red Mars. I'm sorry, Red Moon, right? And that's why it's Red Moon, right? And China is like the first to start building this stuff out. The United States is really late to the game, and they kind of have what basically seems like a, you know, kind of a Little House on the Prairie version of a moon base that goes on there. So basically, if you look at a U.S. airport right now, right, you take LaGuardia Airport and you compare it to, like, you know, a comparable airport, say outside Beijing or Shanghai, right? It's like, you know, everybody basically says it's like going from you know, the space age to you know, the early 20th century, right? I mean, it's like the differences are so stark and so huge. So anyways, that's what that's gonna look for project this. I got way off the topic. Anyways, that was the whole idea about the space station being crashing down nuclear places. So that's what's going to happen. What we're choosing to do here in this country, right, and, you know, yeah, in this country primarily, is we're basically saying, okay, we're going to leave it up. The decisions are going to be made by private corporations, right? And we're going to hand over the decision-making capacity and abilities to them. And so that's why you get something like SpaceX's Starlink, right? Because it's done with the aspirations of like Elon Musk and SpaceX in their head, but what they'd like to offer. But they're doing it just thinking about their own specific interest. They're not thinking about what the impact is going to be on other things in orbit. They're not going to think about what it's going to impact our view of the night sky or astronomers' view of the night sky. And now NASA has just basically come out and say, look, SpaceX is planning on launching another 30,000 of these these satellites as part of its Starlink system, right? And so they're going to have that complete coverage and all this stuff. And they're saying, hey, you know what's going to happen? This is actually going to interfere with the Hubble Space Telescope's ability to kind of see certain things in the night sky, because the satellites are going to be in its what do you call that? Your line of sight, right? And they're also saying, right, because of the way that they NASA kind of works to kind of detect asteroids, this has been increasingly an issue, right? They're tracking different asteroids, trying to determine if there's ever one that's ever going to be that's ever going to actually hit the Earth. So they track this, is actually have an asteroid tracking program. That those 30,000 small satellites, right, may give us 30,000 plus, may make it more difficult or impossible for the agency to detect incoming asteroids. So once again, don't look up. Ross just chimed in too as well. He was saying this a little bit back. He said, if you look at Woke PA, they are actively petitioning to get people like Melissa Berger fired. That's insane. She's somebody who's being currently targeted right now by the online kind of right-wing brown shirt snitch site, Woke PA. So there you have it. Okay, what else do I want to say? Oh, so, okay, yeah, so I was going to talk about foundation and some other stuff. So this has been an ongoing conversation too as well. I know, like, Chris is really Chris is a fan of the show. We go back and forth on Discord quite a bit, on our Discord channel, which you can sign up for too if you want. Information on that is in the show notes. and he's a big fan of Foundation, and I've been kind of like, the jury's still out on it. Okay, so I've watched the conclusion of the first season now, and now I think I'm on board, right? The conclusion of it, right, ties together a bunch of lines, storylines, in a way that I can kind of see a little bit better about where it's going, and I like the direction that it's going. There's 10, the season is 10 episodes, and the 10th episode is one of these that is just freaking awesome. It was an awesome episode. So, fingers, thumbs up. Well, I don't know what's going on in my brain. Thumbs up to that. I'm off. So definitely one to watch. If you haven't read the Foundation series, Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, just know this ahead of time. If you decide that you're going to watch it, it'll take a little time to just wrap your head around, say, some of the scope and the world building stuff. And I read, to be honest with you, I don't remember how much I read of the book. As I was watching the series, more of it was coming back, but I have like no concrete memory of sitting there reading the book. So it's a weird thing, right? So I know I've read it, but I don't know how far it went or how much of it I read. But so I saw it kind of coming back in my memory, and and so I was like, oh yeah, okay, now this is making sense. I see where that blah blah blah. Without that, I'm not sure how much it would be. It might actually not. It might actually help not to have read the book. So I don't know, but definitely that's cool. I'm looking forward to starting Ozark. Ozark is its latest season of that show. Just, man, that always grabs me. I think that the pacing of that show is so freaking good. And it's kind of it's like that moments of, say, the cringe, the kind of, there's nobody's really good, it's like one of those shows. The characters are like, you have these for me at least, you have these characters who are really compelling characters, but they're not like good characters, but they're not just like the anti-hero. They're kind of complex and crazy. Take it easy, Amy. We'll see you later. She's checking out. Thank you. Last thing I want to say. So the one thing I want to kind of put a note on. So the show, for those of you who know that my obsession with the Dungeons and Dragons, you got to have Amy. Well, let's see. Amy says the one with Tom Hardy, 2017 on Hulu. That's what she's saying. The one with Tom Hardy. Later meeting info. Check out Taboo. It's called. It's a Tom Hardy 2017 on Hulu. Okay, all right, we'll do. Check it out. So there's a show, like, you may have heard of Critical Role. Critical Role is kind of like, like the star of the D&D voice actor live stream shows, right? They've got like millions of viewers, and they've kind of helped launch this little subculture of D&D streams, and popularize it and things like this. Even though there's been other streams around, but this kind of really took off for a bunch of reasons. But and they have books that are connected to them now, and there's like so they have a animated series that just dropped, right? And I was actually I just started watching some of Critical Role stuff, right? I watched, as you know, like here's my mug, right? The Dungeon Run. That's like that's what got me in, thanks to my brother. My brother said, check this out. I did. I'm totally hooked. But so anyway, but I wanted, I finished that season. I was like, man, I'm jonesing for it. I love having that playing and the background as I'm trying to just work on mindless stuff. And so I started watching some of the Critical Role stuff. The first season I just couldn't get into because it's still, you start in the middle of their game where they start having regular shows and they start streaming it. So you have to pick up on it, and there's a lot of insider stuff and everything. But anyways, it got translated into, the characters are really kind of interesting. And I like the world, right, that I have there. I'm not as big a fan of the storytelling in Critical Role as I am with Dungeon Run. But so they have the Legend of Vox Machina, and I'm like, I don't know. If you're interested in this stuff, I was really disappointed, right, in that, in one thing in particular, right? It's how would you say it? It's like there's like a frat boy-ness to some of it, right? Like there's one, like they actually have, right, in the first show, right, they actually have like, if you've watched, and I'm sure this is what they were trying to reproduce, right, which is also problematic. The first season of the Game of Thrones, right, that was just like nudity everywhere, right? And you had, you had the lead character, right? This little person who's a dwarf in the show, as they call him in the show, so I'm using that word. And he's like the sex addict or whatever. And so now you've got this show, Vox Machina. It's animated, and they've got one of those scenes in it, right? They got like a quote unquote nude scene with the gnome character. Now he's taking on that one. I was like, really? You really need that? You got to have that, right? As part of that, you got to have the kind of the retrograde kind of like, frat boy humor as part of this. And that bothers me primarily because, on this show, we've had discussions about this before, about how there's some really cool stuff that is happening around inclusiveness and critiquing questions of race, right? Kind of like really actively resisting kind of like deep like sexism and misogyny, and so really progressive, interesting stuff that kind of can bring this kind of role-playing, environment into a really cool conversation with kind of a multi-racial, multicultural democracy, right? And to see this is the show that gets launched as it's coming out of that was just kind of a disappointment, because it's really kind of, it reaffirms the kind of like, even though there's men and women who've been taking part of it, right? And the women are strong characters, I'll say that. But it brings this kind of like outmoded way of kind of like engaging with some of these questions. Now, maybe I'll see that I'll take a different direction, but you have some of that. There's, some really good voice acting in it. There's some good, the storyline is interesting thus far. But it's like a little disappointing. So anyways, so that's all I got for this week, everybody. Yes, remember Amy has suggested that we check out Taboo. That is on Hulu, Tom Hardy 2017. I will go check that out. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the discussion. And thank you all for the work that you do. And if you're out there on Twitter, I want to remind you to, if you haven't already, to send your best wishes to Starry-Eyed JGC. She's on Twitter, and she's one of our Twitter warriors, and she lost her dog Juno this weekend, so just want to kind of give her that shout out, let her know we're thinking about her. All right, so this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Thank you all for tuning in. Remember, on Monday at 1 p.m. special time, we've got Stephen Caruso for the Pennsylvania Capital Times. We're looking forward. We're trying to get Diana Lagerman on the show next week too as well, so got some good stuff coming up. Talk to you soon, everybody.